Have you ever wondered how to run Linux in Docker? Today we're going to delve into that very topic. But first, let's set the stage by understanding what Linux and Docker are. Linux, as many of you would know, is a popular open-source operating system. Docker, on the other hand, is a platform that allows developers to package applications into containers, standardized executable components that contain everything the app needs to run. Now combine the two, and you get something truly powerful. Running Linux in Docker offers numerous benefits. It provides isolation, ensuring that whatever happens in the container stays in the container. It guarantees consistency, meaning your application will behave the same way regardless of where it's run. And lastly, it enhances efficiency, as Docker containers are lightweight and fast. All these factors make running Linux in Docker an enticing prospect. So, let's dive into how exactly you can run Linux in Docker. Before we get started, we have to make sure your system is ready. To run Linux in Docker, your system should meet certain requirements. You'll need a 64-bit operating system and at least 4 GB of RAM. You'll also need to have Docker installed. Let's talk about installing Docker. Docker is compatible with various operating systems including Windows, macOS, and of course Linux. For Windows and macOS users, you can download Docker Desktop from the Docker website. Just follow the installation guide and you're good to go. For Linux users, the process is a little different. You'll need to use the terminal. Don't worry, it's not as intimidating as it sounds. You'll just need to run a few commands to download and install Docker. We'll leave a link in the description with detailed steps for all operating systems. Now that we have Docker installed, we can proceed to the next step. The first step to running Linux in Docker is pulling a Linux image. At the heart of Docker's magic is the Docker image. But what is it exactly? Picture a Docker image as a lightweight, standalone, executable package that includes everything needed to run a piece of software. It's got the code, runtime, system tools, system libraries, and settings. It's like a blueprint for your Docker container. To get a Linux image, we turn to Docker Hub, a vast repository of images available for use. Think of it as the App Store for Docker images. And how do we get this Linux image? We use the docker pull command. It's as simple as typing docker pull, followed by the name of the image you want. For example, to pull the latest Ubuntu image, you'd type docker pull Ubuntu. With our Linux image ready, we can now create a Docker container. Creating a Docker container is a straightforward process. Let's dive right in. Once you've pulled your chosen Linux image, the next step is to create a Docker container from this image. To do this, we use the docker run command, followed by the image ID or name. Now let's shed some light on a couple of crucial flags. The it flag is used to run the container in interactive mode. This allows you to interact with the container as if it were an actual Linux machine. The name flag, on the other hand, is used to assign a custom name to your container. This is helpful when you're dealing with multiple containers and need to keep track of which is which. So in essence, your command would look something like docker run it name my _Linux container Ubuntu. And just like that, you've created your very own Docker container. We now have a running Linux container, but how do we interact with it? Interacting with your Linux container is just as easy as creating it. The key here is the docker exec command. This little powerhouse lets you run commands in your Linux container while it's still running. Imagine it as a direct line of communication with your container, giving you the ability to execute commands as if you're right there inside it. Let's say you want to list all the files in your container. All you need to do is type docker exec, followed by your container's ID, and the command you wish to execute. Like magic, you'll see a list of all the files in your container. Now, what if you want to exit the container but don't want to stop it? That's where the detach sequence comes in. By pressing Ctrl P, followed by Ctrl Q, you can exit the container without stopping it. Now you know how to interact with your Linux container. But what if you want to stop it? Managing your Linux container is an essential part of using Docker. It's like being a ship captain where the ship is your Docker container and the sea is the Linux world. You need to know how to command your ship effectively. To stop your container, like docking your ship, you use the docker stop command. It's as simple as typing docker stop, followed by your container's name or ID. The container will halt, but it's not gone. It's just resting, waiting for your next command. To start the container again, you use the docker start command. Just like docker stop, you follow it with your container's name or ID, and voila, your ship is back sailing the sea. Sometimes though, you might need to get rid of a container for good. It's here that the docker rm command comes into play. It's like sending your ship to a scrapyard. Remember, use it wisely, and only when you're sure. With these commands, you can effectively manage your Docker containers. Running Linux in Docker is a simple and efficient process. We've walked through the steps together, starting with preparing your system. We've learned how to pull a Linux image, create a Docker container, and interact with that Linux container. Managing the Linux container might have seemed intimidating, but we've broken it down into manageable steps. Remember, Docker's real power comes from its efficiency and portability. It allows you to create, deploy, and run applications with ease, all while using minimal system resources. It's a game changer in software development, enabling you to work in an environment that mirrors your production system. It's all about making your life as a developer easier. And let's not forget, running Linux in Docker is just the beginning. There's a whole universe of Docker possibilities to explore. Get creative, experiment, and discover what Docker can do for you. And with that, you're now equipped with the knowledge to run Linux in Docker. Keep exploring.